We will go ahead and call this council work session to order. Wednesday, December 20th, the time is 2 p.m. We'll go ahead and open it up for visitor comments. If you'd like to come up and make a comment, keep it 3 minutes or less and state your name for the record.
I can't hear what they say. I'm sorry, I just don't hear what you say, but
It said now is open for visitor comments. If you'd like to come up and make a visitor comment, come on up. Keep it to 3 minutes or less and state your name for the record, please.
my name is Ron Tromlitz. I don't think the name of the messenger was the most important issue. It's the message that was relayed. And it's what's caused the messenger to feel compelled to deliver the message. It seems we have a worried leadership. I realize my issue with the city should acknowledge that most of you weren't counselors when I had issues with the St. Helens W49 contract. My issue involved the 2 million gallon reservoir leaking 74,000 gallons per day. This leakage resulted from work and application of a geotextile mat with 2 coats of epoxy. This increased the leaking, yet I was told the reservoir wasn't leaking. This brought a surprise concerning what caused the increased leakage from the 16,000 gallons a day. The W49 contract was concerning when you realized there was no investigation or exploration of the reservoir's interior. The plans were made without draining the reservoir. And what was the intent of withholding access to the reservoir? The contractor is now expected to work in the winter season with challenging moisture and groundwater infiltration. The St. Helens W49 contract is an event that started bad and ended with the death of a reservoir. The W49 contract can be divided in 2 time periods. The first began in October of 2016 and continued through October of 2019. Western Partition stated to continue working and patching was not going to prove successful. The second time period begins with lawyers and 30 months of delay. I return to the city council meetings because my concern is what is contained in the Walker Consultants report. This was an investigation of the rehabilitation's failure. When this report was presented to WPI, Carboline, and Kennedy Jinks, they all claimed no liability for the failure. The Walker report also is showing the city's actions. The city has been in control of W49 for its entirety. The city does not make a claim of no liability. They are the party of claiming client privilege. It is an interesting way of telling the public that there's something that needs to be hidden. So I continue to report on the information that is available in documents and comments. This has proved worrisome to the administration. I believe the city's silence is part of complicity and shares the same responsibility that requires transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other visitor comments?
So yeah, there's a lot here today on our agenda. Somebody said,
State your name for the record.
oh, sorry, pretty high. Somebody's sitting here with my internet being down. I'm very interested to see, and not gonna have it fixed for a day, which doesn't seem like a very long time, but when you're sitting there like, oh, I can't do that, oh, I can't do that, oh, I can't do that, it's pretty frustrating. So, I'm very interested to see what they have to say, but I'm also very concerned that you're going down a road that the city can't afford, and considering our current budget. Certainly, there's a lot of people I think that would prefer to have someone besides Comcast and another choice, but on the other hand, I'm concerned about the expense. And so I think we need to be very cognizant of what that's gonna cost. I'm also want to talk about the tourism contract that is up for review. I hope all you do is say yes. I'm probably certainly out of the people that are on the council now, more informed about the tourism contract than anyone, because I've actually done it. I was the chair of the chamber when we had the tourism contract. And so I'm very familiar with the tourism and how it worked and how it didn't work prior to our current contractor. And I don't understand why this is even an issue. The contract has just a couple of weeks before it expires. You need to renew it today. And instead of sort of acting like something needs to change every year, I think that it's sends the message that you're not happy, and that should be the opposite message. This contractor has been here for 9 years and has overperformed and delivered exactly what she said she would have done. Contrary to what every other person that had been in that job has done, including myself when I was the chair. And finally, police staffing. Well, as you are aware, I am opposed to the building of the police station and billing it for our water bill. The staffing, I think, is an emergency at this point in time. And even though I believe the $10 fee on the water bill is not legal, I think in an emergency situation, which I think that we have, I could deal with a couple of years while we get past this retirement phase. And so I would support continuing the fee on the water bill if it was only for staffing and not for building a building. If you want to build a building, get a levy. To me, it's just that simple. And finally, I want to talk about the budget. And hopefully you have people there, because that's obviously going to be a critical thing. But I'm also unhappy that Jane Garcia, among other people, were rejected off the budget committee. Clearly, you have people that you have approved for other committees that don't live within the city. And for you to reject other people is a double standard. And I don't see how we should do that. And there would be no one that's more qualified to be on a budget committee than James.
Any other visitor comments?
Steve Topaz, 360 St. Helens Street. As I have continuously seen the verbal and written comments that I have delivered be totally rewritten and presented and approved by the city council, my written comments have been delivered to the council members by email. It has been pointed out that most of the council does not open emails sent to them from the public. The value of this information to the out-of-town businesses and possible residents indicating the city of St. Helens does not want the truth to be known by the public. A budget committee should be held within a month. This meeting should not set the final budget, but examine the causes for the financial problems that the city have to handle this coming year. Questions: where did the money go with the non-standard accounting that was done by John Walsh's assistant / financial director? What was the cause of Cascade leaving? Did the problems of the contract that John Walsh arranged with Mark Comfort play a role? Did the problems of the grow facility, both legal and physical, affect their decision? How much of the mortgage did the grow facility pay? What are the near-term financial requirements to supply enough water to keep the sewer treatment plant operational? What will be needed to permanently keep the sewer plant operational, and how much will it cost? Will the geotech problems under the waterfront property affect the value of the property or the type of development that can be allowed? Has the First Street Gateway project had a geotech review of the underground conditions? Unknown continuous contract for the Halloween Town project with a single contractor generated by John Walsh should be reviewed to find out how much monies were collected over the past 4 years and determine if this contract in its present form should be continued. The location of the police station has federal limits put on it because of the floodplain issues. Will these federal limits remove the possibility of federal financing for the public for police projects in the future? In the recent building of a large apartment complex on Gable Road has enlarged the workload on the city's undersized police department. This complex has altered the traffic flow pattern in a way that greatly limits commercial traffic. How much this complex reduce the viability of the industrial park? There are many long-term engineering problems the city must face. The budget process should begin as soon as possible to plan for that. Thank you.
Any other visitor comments? I just want to state, we'll go to Zoom, yeah, but I would also want to state that Counselor Sundin is online. We'll go ahead and go to Zoom visitor comments. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand and we'll ask you to speak. Go ahead.
Well, hello, Steve Toski. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so a couple things. Thank you very much. I'm on my way in from the airport. We're going to be seeing you at 7. Regarding the continuation of spending on the architects for the riverfront, that has to stop. That should be denied. We should be stopping all spending right now on architects until we get a handle on our finances. We know for a fact that we spent $1 million on the police station and it ended up being too big of a design. So I really think we need to take a look and make sure that this design that we're actually moving forward with is something that is affordable and reasonable before we spend any more money in that direction. And I think there are big question marks on the city's finances, so that should just be a no today. Regarding the tourism contract, we've got a great model. It's working. Our tourism program came off well. Our contractor did everything we needed them to do. People are concerned about the finances of our tourism program. Right now, the city has a contract where those finances are invisible to the public. This isn't the problem of our contractor. That's the problem with the city's contract with our additional which were the that lays the golden eggs in our city. Let's be very, very careful that we don't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. I would ask the council go slow. Let's exercise caution. Let's make sure that we go carefully, get the real facts before we make any rash decisions. I congratulate the council again on implementing the successful program. Let's keep it going and make whatever tweaking we need. And I'm happy to be involved in that process if you would like. I go to every single tourism event in the city that I can get to, which is a lot. And I'm happy to report back on what I see there on the ground. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Anybody else on Zoom? Okay. Go ahead and go on to our first item, which is update on broadband feasibility by Strategic Networks Group. Michael Curry is on Zoom and going to give us an update because this isn't the first time we've seen Michael.
It's been a little while, but no, it's not the first time. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Michael's getting tuned in here. I just wanted to introduce this issue. This is something that council several years ago allocated ARPA funds for, to do a broadband feasibility study to look at what supporting broadband investments in our community looks like. And we did a fair amount of work with that. We're about 3/4 of the way through it. We've already allocated the money. This is a check-in on that. And it's not looking at run for broadband a little bit better than we initially started, and turn it over to Michael to kind of talk about all the work that we've done today, which is pretty extensive.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Good to see everyone again. I'll be essentially going over the work as John Walsh just mentioned, done to date, as well as talk about some of the next steps to wrap up this existing contract, as well as talk about the upcoming BEAD funding that is becoming available for infrastructure as well as digital inclusion. There's a significant amount of funding available. There's 600 million being allocated to the state of Oregon, and we want to make sure that St. Helens can get their fair share to address the gaps that we've identified. So if there are any questions, council, as I present, please feel free to jump in. And, as I said, 10, 15 minutes to go through the content, and then sort of 5 minutes to any Q&A that we have.
Sounds good.
All right. So I wanted to start off with, the digital needs and readiness assessment that we did back in 2021. So that was about 2 years ago when we started this. And we start with this digital needs and readiness assessment because it really gets to the why. Why are we doing broadband? I mean, just for the sake of broadband? No, it's for, what people stated as goals. And this is to the council and some of the key stakeholders in St. Helens. And they all, number one and two was expanded online education and training opportunities and new opportunities for work and economic growth. And we know how important, especially with COVID, how important that has been in the last 3 years to people. Access to competitive broadband was up there too, with 96% of the stakeholders indicating that was number one. Remote and better integrated access to health services, and then monitoring and management of clean water. Those are the top goals that were stated. All of those four, besides broadband, for the broadband, are enabled or facilitated by high-speed internet. And then in terms of the issues and needs that we found in St. Helens, number one was increasing good paying job opportunities, 96%. And there was a lot of people seeing this response barriers. Everyone saw that as number one. Everyone was on the same page as that. Stimulating local business growth and innovation, also very, very strong. Retaining and attracting businesses and population. So, this is economic retention and growth. Again, a lot of those activities are now enabled and actually only can be supported with broadband. Expanding local workforce skills, also important for training, also by broadband. And then improving availability and delivery of civic services. Not as high, but also pretty strong in terms of one of the top 5 for council and the local leaders in St. Helens at that time. So, sorry, was there a question there?
No, it was a cough.
Okay. And so between October 21 and May the following year, 22, we conducted an assessment, pretty rigorous in outreach and so forth. We had a high participation rate. And some of the key things that we wanted to share with you were, that over half of households wanted something better now. And another over a third would consider other options. Businesses, about 40% wanted something better now, and almost half of them saying would consider better options. So they not satisfied in their access, and changing service providers, very likely over 3/4 for households, and over 2/3 for businesses, with another 18% for households saying somewhat likely. So when you have over 90% of your residents who are participating in this saying we want to change service providers, there's a significant issue with the service that they're getting. And household, the businesses are very similar, almost overall, so 90% at very likely or somewhat likely. In terms of what they're spending, households, most of them spend between $100 and $150 a month. Over 1/3 of businesses are spending over $200 a month. That's pretty significant. The averages that we're seeing in other places, $50 to $70 for 50 to 100 megabytes. There's some they're getting a gig for 70 to 80, but there's some gaps that we see here, and we've actually mapped some of that. That's the next slide. We thought this was also important. With the goals being retention and growth of businesses and population. Well, if people are not getting the broadband that they need, almost a third would definitely leave. Another 20% would very likely leave. The under 65, much higher likely to leave. Almost 40%. Definitely, and another over 20% very likely. So you've got over half of the participants under 65 saying they're going to leave. Even the over 65, so they have the workforce ready to leave, but also those who are older. This is a significant issue. You don't have the broadband you need, and you're about to, leave St. Helens for a place where you can have the access that you need. And we heard one of the visitors mentioning that today, that, even a day being down is an issue. And we all know that as we work increasingly online. And the last sort of chart here is on the household income. Those who are earning more than $100,000 a year, almost 40% definitely will leave, another 27 very likely to leave. That's pretty significant. So the people that you want the most, the younger and the higher earners, they're the most likely to leave. We want to keep them. So what can we do to bridge those gaps? Well, first of all, we need to understand those gaps, which we'll get into. And then finally, in terms of selecting location, broadband was somewhat important. It was essential for a quarter, and very important for another 20%. But in terms of remaining in location for businesses, over 50% said it's essential. And another almost 18% said it's very important. So more than 2/3 of business saying it's very important, essential to remaining in location. So there's a risk of businesses relocating out of St. Helens without better broadband. And in terms of the speed tests that we conducted, this is the individual business or household that conducted a speed test, where they clicked on it, did a speed test. All the big red dots are less than 25 megabits per second, which is really, it's not even broadband. It's the lowest sort of definition that the FCC used to use. It should be 120, and most of the BEAD funding is looking at 100. So 100 down, 100 up. So less than 25, it's a challenge. And you can see it's pretty much distributed across St. Helens. The one caveat to this is it may be because of their subscriptions. It may be because they can't afford the $100 to $150 that people are paying on average. So it could be affordability. It could be that they're not just getting the speeds. So that's something that is part of the next phase that we're looking at still. But in terms of satisfaction, the red is not fast enough. Where the dark greens are very fast. And you can see there's a sort of a random distribution across the city for that, as well as, there's some people, north of the city and west of the city that have participated, even though they're not part of St. Helens, those triangles on the top of that map there. So that's, a lot of disparate levels of satisfaction in St. Helens with the speeds. In terms of the availability for funding, as I said, there's $600 million that was awarded to the state of Oregon by BEAD. They're in the process now of designing a plan to allocate that, and then going through a competitive process to allocate those funds to each of the counties, and then also to the cities. The unserved areas, which are in red, and the darker the shade of red, the higher percentage of unserved premises in that census block, they're the current priority to receive BEAD funding. And at this point, we see just over 1,038 households in 80 census blocks that need to be addressed. Then comes the 120 threshold, and hopefully 100. But there are, a lot of St. Helens is without that funding. Part of our work, and one of the things that we're requesting down the road is, in January and February, and I've reached out to the county on behalf of John Wallace's introduction. The actual FCC data is available now. We didn't have access to it before. It's now available, so we can identify which actual households do or do not have broadband at 25.3, at 120, or 100. So we want to know those exact figures to get an exact number about here's what our BEAD request is for, in this case, based on the 1,038 is 3 million. But if that number changes significantly because the actual FCC data, what should that be? And then we can make a strong case for that. I'll pause there if you have any questions.
So let's say that number changed, and it's a higher amount, goes to 2,000. Obviously gives us maybe 5 million BEAD requests.
Something like that, yeah. And so we're trying to, any request that we make, here are the numbers. Here's the premises. Here's what those cost factors are, and that's what that request to the state will be.
And just so the public that is watching it is just tuning in, this is basically, we hired you to look at the feasibility of what it would cost and how it could pay for itself, and potential public-private partners as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple aspects that really good point, which is one, what are the gaps, not only in connectivity, but also are people using it to its full potential? Two, there are municipal facilities that if there's a patchwork of connectivity that needs to be addressed, so that each facility can get a gigabyte of connectivity with that and not be paying extreme amounts for that. So that's where those public-private partnerships can be so important to get that digital infrastructure in place, make it cost reasonable, and not paying sort of rates that are significant. And basically, in this current financial situation, we want to be as cost effective with the funding that that we have. So looking at those options about what is possible, so that everyone has access to fiber. And if it's not feasible, fixed wireless is an option, or other technologies. But fiber is that future-proof technology that we should get across the city, all the facilities, schools, and businesses, so they can fully participate in the digital economy.
I think that's one of the things that we're gonna, want to talk about more, is the possible outcomes. So say we're asking for that 3 million. What, how does that work? Is that something the city needs to match, or how does that work as far as outcomes from the money?
Right. Well, that's that. The Oregon Broadband Office is currently working through that, and that's something we're going to be working through. What we're going to be preparing is what is, with that data from the FCC, which is sort of the next action items here. Hard to read, and I'll go through them. But is to number 3 and number 4 is to verify the unserved and underserved locations for St. Helens, as well as does every community anchor institution, which is school, hospital, libraries, other municipal offices and so forth, do they each have a gigabit, and verify that? Because if they don't, that becomes part of the ask. For the funding. Now, what the criteria are, is there matching and so forth, that's something that we're going to be looking at, to the state for, what are the rules and conditions that they're going to be putting to that funding. What we're going to be preparing in this e-strategy report, number 5, is, well, here's what we're asking for in the funding, based on these, premises and so forth that are unserved or underserved, but also we're going to be describing, here's what the outcomes are that we would expect in terms of economic impacts, as well as community benefits to St. Helens if we do that. So it's not just we're asking for money and who knows what happens. No, here's what the money is, here's who we're targeting with that money, and here are the outcomes in terms of economic potential growth with businesses, retention, but also access to health and education and community services.
We'd have that information with the funding that we have already, to the ARPA funding that we've already spent.
Yeah, this is finishing up this section. Item 5 here is basically finishing up the funding that's already been allocated.
I just want to make it clear that for that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not for you, for us and anybody watching.
Understood, understood, yes, no worries. There's some things going forward. So we've already, we're providing number one, the update. We've already provided input, worked with the St. Helens staff on the Oregon broadband plan for the infrastructure, as well as the digital equity funding. And so they're finalizing those plans in the next week, and then submitting it to the feds to be finalized by them. That will then determine, here's how they're going to be allocating those funds. And, there's some work that need to be done, but hopefully they'll take those into account so that, we'll have, as much of that money having, impacts locally. One of the things that, sort of ongoing action items that are, we wanted to talk about was one, there's the state broadband meetings that St. Helens is represented, we could, sit on that, sitting on those meetings on behalf of St. Helens and inform you of any action items or things that need to be done. But also there's this BEAD Volume 2, which is really, that digital equity funding, which is unique. It hasn't been done before. And it's basically, you've got now the connectivity being funded. And hopefully it's not just going to go to ISPs, but also communities get to have a say into how public monies are allocated for connectivity. But once you have the connectivity, it's do those residents, do those businesses know how to fully benefit from accessing education, workforce training, starting a business online, and so forth. And if they don't, how can we help them using those existing stakeholders in the community, economic development, workforce development, getting the libraries to provide access, and help people with training, raising awareness and training. One of the examples is there's an existing program called the American Connectivity Program, and I forget what the number is, but it's less than 10% of St. Helens residents, I think, are actually signed up for it. And it's basically you get a subsidy of $30 a month for your internet, and it's a bit of a challenge to it takes about half an hour to sign up for it, but everybody who's eligible should be signed up for that. And so helping those people be aware of it, sign up for it, and benefit from that subsidy is an example of what can be done. But then also getting some pilots to look at here's something we want to do once if we get that BEAD funding, that full funding, we want to take for example, it's the Cascades plant closing, displaced workers, or identify new workforce opportunities, showing that we've done this already over the last 6 months, and so when in the second or third quarter of 2024, when the BEAD funding for digital equity comes available, here's what we've done, here's how it worked, now we want to scale this to the whole community, here's what the impacts are. That makes a really much more compelling reason for funding, especially when it's competitive against other parts of the state who are also competing for the same limited funds, because the funding that is available will not cover all of Oregon. It's a competitive, there's not going to be enough to go around. So how do we make the best case possible for what's needed in St. Helens? So a couple of examples. I mentioned digital navigators. There's 1,183 households that could be receiving benefits, and they need to be engaged. So that's an immediate action item. Digital economy management, basically helping get that grant applications. There's a whole funding process and collaborations and planning that need to happen for the design and engineering. Some of these hubs, digital innovation hubs, to basically help be the showcases of technology, what you can do with it, and help training and so forth. So these are the ideas that we wanted to present as part of that e-strategy report, and then have a discussion. So yeah, in a month or two, when we're finished drafting this, present it to you, and then have some discussion around that is the plan. So again, why we're doing this is it's to enable affordable, robust, and competitive broadband for all in St. Helens, to enable the enhanced services of health, education, smart community, public safety, and so forth, and develop capacity of local people to to educate those key decision makers in our planning. And digital inclusion is about connecting those unserved and underserved populations. And that's going to be a lot of working with local existing stakeholders, not to build on St. Helens's, payroll, expand more responsibility. And you guys know if we get this funding, we're going to engage local organizations, like a general contractor. Okay, here's what we want to do. Here's the funding that we're going to provide you. Here are the resources that you have. Here's we're going to augment this, and here are the goals we're going to, work with you to achieve. And we're going to be just, monitoring, overseeing you. But you guys are taking this. We're building your capacity to do this because you're already working with those targeted groups in the community. And so that's the most cost-effective way to do this. And it gives St. Helens that oversight because you've got that purview for the community. So I'll pause there, and I just wanted to sort of put the question to the council. I mean, are there any aspects that are highest priority, and who are the most important people to connect with and people's lives to change in St. Helens?
Maybe for another counselor to step in.
Always talk up here.
No, I think it's just the underserved youth, the family that can't afford it and doesn't know about the program for the $30. And I think our school district actually does a pretty good job of working with the students to get them signed up. And it's probably would be a lot lower number if we didn't have our school district doing that. But maybe just the elderly too, that doesn't have the income to meet that $30 a month reduction. So it's only basically $10 a month for internet service. It's not the highest quality, but it is internet service. So, and
those are definite targets.
This all started from COVID. Everybody was on their computer and it was laggy. It was bad. It was not good. We've been working on broadband for about 2 years prior to getting a hold of you and just kind of tossing around the idea. And I like that we'll at least have something if present the state and see if we qualify for monies. And then working a contractor or a private company that would like to do that. Whether they're gonna need some profit, and it's kind of like a local PUD kind of, so to speak, maybe, but an internet service.
Well, that's something that we can help you explore and understand what the options are so you can make the best decision. Who are the local providers already? Who's ready to work with you on that kind of PUD opportunity, and also that you have some say in how those federal funds are being allocated, because otherwise it's just a giveaway to those private ISPs when in fact this is taxpayer money. We get to have to say of how that money is spent in our community and who's connected and how, and so that there's good competition.
I was just gonna say, I think we've seen a culture shift after COVID with utilizing internet in a different way other than just entertainment purposes. I think we've seen a lot of people rely on it to access medical services, to access therapy, and to access school, and a lot of people working from home. And so we want to just be able to accommodate that as our culture does shift into more internet dependent society. And so I think that just facilitates for, the need for everybody. But again, it's the cost. Internet is expensive out here and it's not reliable out here. So, I mean, those are the main things you said, you've seen that in your numbers. So making sure that we check those 2 boxes is important.
Understood.
Question on the, says here, the average cost to connect the structure to the fiber backbone is between $3,000 and $4,000. More if they're farther apart.
Sure. Now, that really depends on the distance. Yeah. Actually, I have one of my engineers on the call that is, they can speak to that. But yeah, it can be a high cost, but roads cost 20 times to 100 times as much as fiber. A 4-lane highway costs 100 times as much per mile as fiber does. But and so looking at how much fiber and internet is important in our lives, I think we can then make those allocations. And when we have the city or a community looking at the investment, those are 10, 15, 20-year investments. So, not trying to recoup all that within, 2 or 3 years makes a big difference in those costs, because 2,000 over 20 years is not a very much different financing number than 2,000 over 2 or 3 years. But we know that the difference, and this is why it's so important for the city to be involved, or a locality or a county, just like with roads or water and sewer, electrical. If you don't have it, you're not going to grow it. You're likely going to die. And all those indirect and community benefits because of roads, there's a whole bunch of benefits from being connected, from having that decent connection, being able to work, that don't go to the internet service provider. But it's, this family now can stay and work remotely from St. Helens. The kids can do their education, the grandparents can, get their remote health and so forth. Those are all benefits that we try to quantify to help make that case for public investment that the ISPs don't capture. And that's not part of their business decision. But for the locality, it's, hey, this is a big factor. And this is why we are prepared to do X as part of this public-private partnership. And that's something that I think, as we work through this and, the funding criteria for BEAD become clearer, we can then help, lay out the options, and you can make a better informed decision about what's best for St. Helens and for St. Helens businesses and residents.
Well, Michael, I have a visitor here and he's raised his hand and asked if he can ask a question, Brady Preheim. So I'm gonna allow him to ask a question. So go ahead, Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question about, it's not just internet, it's also about, you're bundled. So what do you do with the monopoly, which is Comcast, where you're getting your phone and your television as well as your internet? And how do you unbundle that or make it cost competitive? Because they're obviously going to not be very happy with this choice. Are you going to be able to provide all those services, or would you have to then unbundle and pay a penalty for using a municipal internet, but then still having to get phone and TV from Comcast?
Okay, I know a good question, but there's some things to sort of unbundle of that question. So I'm not sure, there's a whole array of options in terms of, a spectrum of options between, you mentioned municipally owned network versus privately owned. Well, a public-private partnership doesn't mean that the municipality is going to, own the network or even run the network. It could be that, they have, made available some infrastructure and then it's open access. Like, think about an airport authority. United and American don't own the airport. They don't run the airport, but they have slots, the gates that they can rent out to say, we get these gates during these, times of the year that we need. And those are wholesale prices. That's sort of a digital infrastructure approach to this. And that needs to be explored, because there may be private providers that are willing to step in and take care of all of it and, have really competitive prices. And, you mentioned Comcast not being, the service that you're, happy with, maybe they can come in. But if that's not sufficient enough, well, maybe that airport authority approach, would be more appropriate. That all needs to be looked at. In terms of the bundling, the incumbents, they like to bundle phone, TV, and internet together, because then they've captured that customer. But when you have better competition for internet, I don't want your internet, I want this internet. And now that I've got good decent bandwidth, I can just buy instead of buying your cable, I can buy over the top, access to video or whatever else I want. So there's a lot of options there, but we have to be careful that the city takes the approach of, look, we're going to make an assessment of where the gaps are, based on the cost to bridge those gaps. What's the best option? Is it to subsidize an ISP or a couple ISPs to do it? Or do we look at setting up a public utility of some sort, or a broadband authority of some sort, that can build infrastructure that any provider can use, just like an airport authority, for a wholesale rate? So it's evening out the playing field, but you need a certain scale to that, and that's part of the work that needs to happen. But the end goal being, we want everyone to have at least 100 by 100 we want it to be, cost competitive, and that the service is of, a competitive service as well, that people can switch to other providers, that you have at least 2 or 3 options. With those criteria, what makes sense for St. Helens, and we looked at this when we started this process back in 2021. The adjoining areas, they may need to come in to give enough scale to make this a worthwhile investment, because there is there's public money available, but there's also a lot of private money that's looking to invest in this kind of digital infrastructure. And we've actually, some of the team, we have relationships with some of those that we can have those discussions, to present them, here's what we got, here's the market. But I think this is getting a bit far down the road, so I'll stop there, but I hope that sort of answers the questions.
Yeah, you did. So, and then you're gonna put all this information together and you'll be coming back to see us, roughly a couple months, 3 months, 2-3 months out, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that's the plan.
Any other questions for Michael?
I do have one. So basically, my understanding is that we need to get the fiber infrastructure in place. Right? And then bring all these potential ISP providers in if they want to run their own. So it's not just Comcast, it could be whoever decides they want to provide a service, right? But they would be using our utility, our fiber.
So if we find that, we've got to get into the details of, where's the actual infrastructure there. Comcast have got stuff, AT&T's got stuff. Other providers got, where's the infrastructure? Where are the gaps? Okay, if there are gaps and it becomes really cost prohibitive to get a deal with Comcast, or whether to use their existing if it's there, or if it just doesn't exist, that's where, we look at it and say, okay, it's now worth, here's what's going to cost to invest. But here are the benefits to the community if we do invest to create that, that digital infrastructure. And so that's part of the analysis. I have Drew McNaughton on the call. Maybe I get him to speak to that if Drew, you're able to get unmuted.
There we go.
There you go. Hey, Drew.
Hey. Good afternoon. Yeah, I just talk a little bit to my background, and what we're talking about is in terms of public-private partnership. I've had experience with that in a couple of different countries, including the US, and it's very possible to achieve. It's not a trivial undertaking, but it is totally possible. And in my experience, the issues we just talked about, once the infrastructure is there and you've accomplished that, those services and providers show up almost automatically if there's sufficient scale in that market to which I'm referring to Michael's point about collaborating a little bit more broadly than St. Helens, just to make it make sense market wise. But the outcomes are there. I've seen it happen in a couple of different states. There's actually quite a number in the US. In Europe, this is a model that's been used for many years quite successfully. And in Canada, a number of them, less so. The US is further along than Canada, but all I have to say, it's very possible. There's work to be done, but it's very possible to achieve.
And in the end, the benefit is you get to be stewards of your own future, rather than to be beholden by private sector who's, here just the numbers by quarter. No, we're investing in this for the next 10, 15, 20 years for community benefits, so our kids can stay, so we can retain the businesses, so we can grow, any kind of business that we want that, needs internet, that we have that capability, and we're not trying to, extract as much profit as we can. No, we need to make a profit, but it's not, for the sake of it. No, this is infrastructure, just like roads, like water and sewer, like electricity. And what kind of business case, or I call it the economic case for broadband and digital infrastructure. And so what does that look like? And that's part of the analysis we want to come back to you with, to say, here's what we're finding, here are the options that you have, so you can make a better informed decision, and then, go after that BEAD funding that's available, and then, private sector if you wanted, and, it really depends on the goals and also, what gaps we're trying to overcome.
Well, thank you, Michael. We look forward to seeing what the report shows, and I suspect we're got a lot of underutilized areas within our community. We
Yeah.
look forward to see you in 2 or 3 months from now.
We'll see you all in a couple of months. If there are any questions in the meantime, please, through John Walsh, please, and because we'll be working closely with John on these.
Sounds good. Thank you, Michael, again.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time today.
Okay, on to our next item, which is review House Bill 2984 for commercial and residential building conversions. Any planner, Gretchen?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
So this relates to resolution 1999 on tonight's regular session agenda, which pertains to system development charges. And you're thinking, hey, we haven't been talking about this lately. Why are you springing this on us now? The reason is we have to do something before December 31st, and this is the last meeting to do so. So let me explain this bill in the context of the system development resolution tonight. So one bill that came out of the 2023 legislation is this House Bill 2984. And it amends the state, the Oregon revised statute pertaining to affordable housing allowed outright. So what does allowed outright means? Basically, from a zoning standpoint, it's something that you cannot prohibit or make it conditionally permitted and go to the planning commission and stuff like that. So it means that a local government has to allow the conversion of buildings or a portion of a building from commercial to residential. And it prohibits a government, it's kind of a preemption from some of the zoning standards that we have. So it means you can't require a zone change. And so if the zoning doesn't allow it, sorry, doesn't matter. And you can't require a conditional use permit. So if it's something, for example, let's say an apartment complex requires a conditional use permit, sorry, can't do that. It also exempts economic considerations. So we've been talking about updating our economic opportunities analysis lately, for example, where you are evaluating your employment lands, commercial industrial lands, and even though conversion of a commercial building to residential could take away from some of that employment component, can't worry about that either. This doesn't apply to properties within inadequate utilities, steep slopes, floodplain, natural hazards. So some of those areas would be exempt. It's applicable to cities 10,000 population or greater, and so that's why we get to deal with it. We're above 14,000 now. Fortunately, it doesn't apply to industrial zoning. Interestingly, the way the statute reads is it says areas where industrial uses are allowed. And so conceivably, the riverfront mill subdistrict or waterfront property that's completely undeveloped allows boat building, for example. And so conceivably, that would be an area that it would not be allowed. Of course, there's no buildings to convert there right now. There are some restrictions on parking. And that's just to give you some context, because the main thing we're dealing with, there's also some provisions on how you implement your system development charge rules. But basically, this is to help facilitate taking vacant commercial buildings and converting them to a needed residential use, which may be near other businesses. So that's just some of the context. So let's talk about the system development component by itself. So the way the statute reads is you're kind of restricted on how you implement your system development charge calculations, unless you have a specific policy for commercial to residential conversions in effect before December 31st, 2023, which is just around the corner. And so, I mean, it's kind of silly. We already have provisions in our code which recognizes previous uses to allow credit or reduction to the system development charge. But there's nothing in the code that says this is a specific policy to conversion. So essentially, we're adding to our toolbox just language about
To close the gap of what it would be
Yeah.
if it was converted.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what it's about. Fortunately, it doesn't require any new analysis. It's basically adopting a resolution with that language. So we can exercise our SDCs with a little bit more freedom than would otherwise be.
That makes sense to me. I mean, a commercial building doesn't use nearly what a residential, multiple residential would. And how that should be adjusted.
So that is, that's what's on for tonight. I'm glad we go to conferences sometimes and learn about these things which are not on our radar. And this time we had a meeting left, thankfully, to get it adopted. And we definitely, you know, for years and years, you know, we'd see the legislative summary and a bunch of stuff that doesn't pertain. But the last couple of years and probably several years forthcoming, there's been a lot of stuff. So we're really gonna have to focus on some of those amendments because they keep throwing stuff at us pertaining to housing, and I'm sure that will continue.
It will.
So the fun keeps happening.
Can you speak to the parking issue?
Sure, yeah, so another thing, it limits your how you implement parking. And so the way it reads specifically is it doesn't let you require the amount of parking you would need if it was, say, an apartment complex. So let's say if we were going to make a graph that this is your amount of parking that you would need for the commercial use. It doesn't let you say, okay, well, if this was a building from scratch, you would need this much parking. It forces you to be bookmarked at this point, not including that residential parking calculation. So it does restrict how much parking you can require.
Part of legislation and what is going on with the governor's plan to address the housing market. And why she put together a group of contractors who probably are gonna be difficult for us as far as moving forward with planning and stuff. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but it has been adopted by the state in order to relieve what the contractors feel is the need to expedite housing within the next few years. And that was just last year, and you're right, there'll be a lot more coming down, I'm sure, from this short session towards the cities.
Now, this is one of those things where, you know, we may see something this year and this stuff becomes effective January 1st. So we could see something in February, or it could be 7 years from now before we see something. It's hard to say.
I'm very concerned about this. I think it's very unfair that these things keep getting handed down to smaller cities to just deal with and make accommodations to. We can't even regulate, you know, how many parking spots these places are allowed to have. I just feel like it's really unfair, and to be honest with you, I'm pretty upset about it. And I wish there was something we can do, but it feels like this just keeps happening to us with, you know, here you go, here's your problem, you guys figure it out in these little cities in the
They
state.
didn't charge SDCs on that, per unit?
Yeah.
In the building?
Yeah, so.
Well, it depends on the type of SDC. Some of it is by unit, some of it's by water meter. But if we didn't do this, we would be restricted to only. You're making me have to think here. If we didn't do this, we would be restricted to only charging for water and wastewater, at least the way I read it, with 100% offset of what was there when the building was originally constructed. So if we implement what we're proposing for this resolution, it lets us consider everything, but we still have to allow those credits, which we would anyways.
Didn't quite answer it, but, okay, I have a 10,000 square foot building, let's say, how many units can I get in there? We're allowing residential, but we're
2,100 per unit.
talking multifamily.
Or five.
Now you're gonna go into code issues like crazy.
Yes, and this is what makes me uncomfortable, is it says, okay, you throw away whether or not it's disallowed or not for zoning. You have the parking, but if it's a zoning district that doesn't have a density calculation, it could be awkward depending on the circumstance, and it could result in some ambiguity in how we implement certain codes. You know, when I was reading this and thinking about different scenarios, and it could potentially be tricky.
So our R5 would not, or our lowest, which is going to R.25, right? I think is what. R5 and then 1,500 there per after, you can do it per unit, per square footage of any lot.
Yeah, our R5, I think, is 25. It's our apartment residential, our highest density zone, which is 1,500.
But you're saying this doesn't have any regulations.
Well, it tells you what to exempt. And I think we would have to look at our full cadre of standards and go, okay, well, we can't implement these, but we can implement these. But in zoning districts, this is something we're gonna start working with the planning commission on, where it's not very well spelled out, then we have to make the best call we can.
Main Street say you can't have this policy on a certain windows.
Well, that's the what you do have is it says that it does not pertain to an area that allows industrial uses. It doesn't say industrial zoning. And that's like, it's an interesting choice of wording that they used. And that's why I was thinking about the Mill sub-district out here, because it does allow boat building. It's a mixed use zoning district. Mixed use is traditionally, you know, commercial and residential together, but there's an industrial component there. So is that enough to prevent it from happening there? And so I was thinking about this a step further. Okay, well, let's say we put a policy in our comprehensive plan that says, well, dang it, we're a town on the river, we were a town born on the river, and we're going to embrace boat building everywhere we can. And so we take all of our commercial zoning districts and say, industrial use, boat building, allowed everywhere. Is that enough to prevent this from happening? Maybe.
You can see every storage unit in town convert to a living space. Yeah.
Maybe. Now,
Unless we do something about it, which you're saying there's some potential that we can word things a certain way.
yeah, it's now we could. What is the result of that? And then what changes are gonna happen to this, if any, in the next year? But yeah, there's a potential.
Can't go back to the States. We need to do that.
I'd like to see the planning commission work on it a little bit.
So what I know is that, for, you know, I mean, I'm just gonna speak on a little bit on what is going on at our state level, and I think that it's, very aggressive approach, and I would agree that it's kind of shocking to the system. But, the approach is housing needs, first and foremost, mental illness, schools, and the houselessness issue. And I think they all kind of intertwine with one another, and it's a very aggressive approach, and I think if you tried to litigate and try to have everybody at the table to move it forward, we know how slow government is, you might be a long time getting some momentum on going with that. So I'm just gonna speak on that I think there are gonna be some rules that we don't completely understand, but make sense in a lot of other communities. We talk about vacant buildings in our area. I'm sure a lot of the larger cities have a lot of commercial buildings that are not being utilized. That could house somebody. And maybe should house somebody, especially a homeless veteran, in my opinion, who's had mental illness and PTSD from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq. To the kids that are suffering because mom and dad are maybe an addict. And have been homeless themselves because of poor choices. Cause I believe everything is a choice. And we all, I think just giving those resources and allowing there to be more out there available is not a bad thing. That's why I just wanted to speak on that.
Am I correct in the assumption, kind of making, I don't want to make an assumption, but much like House Bill 3115, right? Starts at the state level and then they just throw it. So realistically, we don't have the
It's
same.
at the federal level,
Okay, but
somebody knows.
but to bring this
Roll down.
House Bill 2984 into play, it's directed toward the bigger cities, correct?
Well,
Like
the
it's
population
Portland,
size.
Portland, Eugene, Bedford, all the big four, right? And then they just blanket it and throw it at us and say, it's your problem.
I think that's fair because one of the more prominent scenarios are vacant office buildings
Which Portland has a lot
in
of.
downtown areas. And so a lot of bigger cities have that. You know, we don't have big office skyscrapers, but they decided to put the threshold down to, that 10,000 mark, which brings us into the fray.
I think it's a good point that you bring up, Councilor Gunderson. And, no, it is. I mean, House Bill 3115, we were scared into trying to have a homeless camp because there was gonna be this huge influx. We're a year out. It's because they want Portland, they want to direct Portland, Eugene, Springfield, Salem to address their issues. And come up with a plan, not in the states.
I think they should be addressing those particular.
So, like I said, I think this is overwhelming to us. It sounds scary, but when it comes to fruition, it's probably not gonna be, it's gonna be one of those things that we're,
Until 7
Maybe
years from
could
now.
waste a ton of time on it.
Already in our law books and we can't do anything about it though.
But at least we have the resolution. It gives us some flexibility on that.
that's right,
And that's,
yeah,
at least for tonight.
yes.
I'd like to see you
somewhat
meet
of a
with the
direction.
planning commission and work on this a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually. It directly relates to the cottage cluster thing because of how we look at housing types in the various commercial districts, and I think that'll kind of help define this should we face it.
I like cottage clusters done right.
Well, I think there's some question from, I know the planning commission, are very heartfelt about the historical implements of the city too. So I know they're gonna wanna have a discussion about that and how we can make sure that we are trying to preserve those buildings too. So,
Since this is time sensitive, we need to vote on it and approve the amendments
Yeah,
today.
but all you're doing tonight is the portion applicable to system development charges. Everything else is already in the statutes. We have to deal with it.
Hey, Jacob, thank you.
Sometime I'll have better news.
yeah, but
Okay. Let's go ahead on to our next item, which is the contract, city, John Walsh.
Tito, you at some point?
Answer. It's kind of our contract, so
Yeah, our
go ahead and read it.
Yeah, we have had a contract with EPC, have for many years, it's evolved over time. I think on the whole, terms, we've gotten a lot more than we bargained for. Tourism's kind of exceeded our expectations year after year after year. It's been rough go here and there, but I think on the level, it's really good for the community to have the presence that we have in the state and the nation as far as the Halloween events and just in the variety that having our thing, which is community branders and people that work with, pay a lot of money for consultants to come and to try to work on their finding a community's identity. Halloween Town has brought that for us, like it or not, and most people are pretty proud of it. Even if they don't like it, they still recognize this community is Halloween's important. The contract that we have in its current form would need some kind of modification to align with the budget to allow the contractor to provide monies back to the city. So I think that even the most minimum amount of level, there's needs to be some kind of a language change. It talks about the revenue sharing component of that back to the city. And beyond that, I think that it's kind of up your feedback about what you want to see. We've moved to this independent contractor agreement to basically have E2C, the city owns the assets, E2C operates the assets. And that's, we have access to, all of the social media, all the trademarked kinds of things, inventory. Just looking for your feedback on what you want to see.
So, John, one of the things brought up was that, how the public is not able to see the tourism funds. Can you speak to the fact that I already know and I try to share with people is that tourism funds are invisible due to rules regarding independent contractor laws. Can you speak to that?
And that's what we worked to define some kind of bright lines with this independent contractor agreement. There's certain tests that you have to be able to, disconnections from the contractor and their work and directing their work and
Micromanaging. little tasks.
regular hours, control over the finances and directing staff and things of that nature. And, working with our legal counsel that we got as close as we could to make that happen. So there is an account that the he has at WANA, that the money that is brought in goes into that account. It's audited. We want to audit it, we're welcome to audit it. Look. Other than that, it's kind of all what she does, how she does it is kind of all on her.
That's an in-house audit.
We used,
You had an auditor last year?
we used the same model from years prior. Maybe the same metrics, not the same auditor. Yeah, John Ellis was here, back helping the transition, getting our new finance director, Gloria, on it. We had some capacity to do that and comprehensive audit and report that I shared, but it's on my desk. That's actually here.
In-house.
He's still a contractor. There could be a perception that he's friendly. I don't see that. The last time we did it with the Moody from Moody, it took a long time. It took several months to get it done.
Well, I think what I'm hearing, there's a lot of questions about where the money funnels through everything. It's very convoluted and where the money in and out and where it goes and what's from and how many employees are putting in the hours for her events. We have to pay for, so that's an added cost, but it's not accounted for. There's a lot of issues, and I think the pushback that I've heard is people need a better accounting, and it's so polarized between people who say she's doing a great job and the ones that look at some numbers and say, well, why are those numbers? I think if a new contract and went out for bid, then it brings it up for anybody. Continue with be the one, obviously, to bid on it, and he knows everything, so. But it's gotta be clarified, and then we're gonna get rid of this criticism of it. And get that off the table. Right now, it's, I have a letter here from Matt Brown, he did some accounting back then. And, that's the best accounting I've seen, but he no longer works there. He's asking questions. Why are you looking at me like that?
I would just, well,
Looking at me angrily.
no, I was just, when you mentioned the accounting, I'm not looking at you angrily. You just mentioned some of the best accounting that you've seen, and I just looked over because I questioned that remark.
I think that it's worth,
That's all.
a question to Gloria to ask from her stance what she thinks about the tourism finances. I mean, she is our financial director, so I think it's worth it to let her chime in about it. I'll put you on the spot, Gloria.
I'm on the spot. So really, it's a situation where you really have to be careful because you're in a private partnership here. You have a independent contractor that is doing the events, and that's what the contract is for, is to provide the events. And it has a profit sharing component to it. Basically, the income and expenses are on the contractor, and it's entirely up to that contractor to report to us, the city, on what the share is to the city. And according to their contract, we pay per certain expenses, and I believe the contractor in essence pays back those expenses through the proceeds that she returns to the city. Really, the accounting part is on the independent contractor according to the contract. So if there's a need or desire to make it more transparent from the contractor, then that would need to be in the contract. It's really not in my hands as the finance director for the city.
Fair. Thank you for making the statement.
So at a minimum level, we want to make sure we have the continuity of operations with tourism. There could be some changes. Actually, I would recommend that there is some changes as far as defining. Well, there's a sharing component, or not sharing, but there's a subcontractor markup fee of 5%. That's boilerplate, which comes out of our language in their boilerplate contract, and defining what that is, I think, is important. This notion of moving to kind of a franchise model where we, rather than taking a percentage of something, we're going to get a percentage of gross sales. I think that's pretty easily to bake into that. In that model, we could also have the contractor entirely responsible for their own expenses and not lean on the motel tax, which would be that $120,000 that goes to E2C would just stay in the hotel motel tax fund. So that gives some capacity to support the general fund. And there's just some other little tweaks about
Speak about that again, how that would work. If we were to not pull that 120 out, how would the contractor get that money?
yes, right now the contractor is paid $20,000 to $10,000 a month, distributed annually or monthly, and that would retain to the city. The contractor would be responsible to generate all the income and pay all the expenses, and then pay a percentage of the gross on top of it.
And then pay herself from the.
So I would just request that in the future, and maybe I was a little bit upset, but I would request that in the future, if you have any ex parte contact, especially with an ex-employee about finances or audits, that you divulge that information to the entire council prior to our discussion. Please. Being completely transparent. I have had zero discussion with anybody on this. I've looked at this packet. I have not even seen documents that you are referring
It
to.
was going back in time. Also, I'd like to go back to 21 on the tourism committee.
And that's why I gave you the look. I'm unaware of what you're even talking about.
I think he's saying he's had contact with him
I
currently.
don't think I was angry. I just kind of raised my head because it was an ex-employee who I had trouble with. And we all had trouble with, and
I'm just reading what he wrote, so. I don't know. What about tourism committee 21? They had recommendations and can we do anything about it? They addressed a lot of the issues then.
yes, we
Pretty
did.
comprehensive.
Yeah, we did actually go through that process.
That was a staff group that.
Oh,
finance
I
director
remember.
organized and several meetings with this man after a bit. But that was before we went to this model and developed the contractor agreement, which just made a lot of those elements. Not, you know, we couldn't ask for that and keep that.
Tina, do you want to speak to you?
I just wanna say that tourism committee, that you're referring to with the finances. That was before Matt Brown, chose an independent auditor in Beaverton to go through the books, which we passed with 100% of accountability. And, there was multiple, times where Mr. Brown would say crazy things like, I don't know how much money is in the bank account. And had trying to pretend that he didn't know how much money is in the bank. Direct questions from council. 3 times, I don't know, I don't trust the numbers. Because he didn't know that the check had cleared the banks, I'm not sure. But he certainly isn't somebody that I would put stock into.
So I can speak a little bit on that. Yeah, at the time, there was a lot of, I didn't know, but the money was actually in the computer, like he said he didn't know. So when we asked those questions, those are the answers we got, and we were perplexed by the answer from our own financial director, who was supposed to be. It was just difficult times, what I can tell you. Anybody who was here at that point in time and sat on the council. We did an audit shortly after that, and it was by him that actually did the audit. And passed, and he was still an employee here when we found out that everything checked out. Correct? I mean, I think I recall that he was still employed here.
And then there was a second audit by an external that you also passed.
Correct, 100% both times.
I think that the questions come about, just because it's very hard for the general public to understand the rules and, of the relationship between the city and an independent contractor, which was my whole reason for, any type of discussions. I feel like we need some type of an educational, video or something, John, bring in a lawyer or something that we can talk to about it, because it is very confusing. And I feel like a lot of times when people are thinking, oh, well, we're not seeing the numbers, it becomes this defense thing. And I personally don't see any issues with the financials of Halloween Town or Tina. I think Tina's done a good job, and every time we've raised the bar, Tina has met those expectations. I know there's a lot of concern out there, and it's my job to represent everybody in the city, including those people that are concerned, which is the only reason why I'm saying what I'm saying. I think that the biggest issue here is lack of education about the relationship. So that's what I think. I think that's where we need to start at, is trying to educate the public and us even on what it means and what we're allowed to ask of our contractor when you have an independent contractor. And, you know, and if we really need to know, you know, every little detail of what she's doing. And if that's the case, then maybe we need to change and talk about changing it from an independent contractor to a city employee. So if that's what the concerns are, I mean, there's a difference there between that having an employee and that person is the head of a department and we're able to ask anything we want from them. We want every single detail of every expense and what money you brought in, but she's not a city employee, she's a contracted person running events. So it's just a different, that's what I try to tell people, but it's hard because.
When we run into some prevailing wage, if she's hiring the people, on these, so. I was just looking at the contract when all this discussion first started, and I was just trying to make sure that I wasn't seeing something in here that, I know it was well vetted, but I know there needs to be some changes, and that's what I thought our discussion was gonna be. Contract. And changes or, additions we'd like to add to it, or changes within the language. We're talking about putting it out or not putting it out. I've heard that discussion, but doesn't matter if there's something in the language that doesn't look right to anybody, we should.
So whether or not you decide to move forward with, you know, putting it out in RFP of sorts, there is some modifications that we would recommend as far as trying a little more detail. Revenue sharing might work, you know, things of that, and without losing continuity of operations, you know, I'd recommend we extend the existing one for like 3 months to kind of work on that. And come back with a modified and decide whether you want to do that. But
And that is to specifically work on the revenue sharing detail of the contract. And what is it? What does the current contract have as far as revenue sharing?
doesn't have,
So
doesn't talk about it.
the addition of that would do what?
It would, conceptually, what we've talked about, it would take that, the $120,000 payment we're currently paying out of the max, you know, the city would retain that. And then we would define the what gross revenue looks like, and then we take a percentage of that, maybe 10%. And that could be, you know, 230,000 net more to the city's budget by moving to that model.
My question is this, like reserving the amount from the general budget, because this doesn't come out of our general budget. But by getting that hotel tax completely, do we get to add that to the general budget or only up to a certain percent?
So most.
So you know where I'm going with that.
Oh, yeah, no, you very much can take those investments and put most of it into and that special revenue into the general, can be transferred to the general fund to support services. Not all of it, because we're pre-2001 adopting it. Most cities that have come to the tourism tax late have 70% has to be used on marketing, 30% go to the general fund. Yeah. Only 3% of that 7% is restricted like that. So it's a good, whatever the math is there, it's a big percentage. They can, you know, go to the general fund and, you know.
My question is, does that work for Tina and E2C?
Have you discussed it with him? Okay. Who would be doing this? You? And Gloria?
We would continue to work with the legal counsel.
Invite our legal and have a work session around it if we wanted to.
I'd like to see Gloria there too, to make sure she's able to understand it and track it and it makes sense to her.
And the independent contractor agreement was also presented by our legal counsel. So, and if we need to have a more deliberate walkthrough on the education of that, we can arrange that. Qualifies but doesn't qualify.
Counselor Sundin, have any thoughts? I heard you.
No. Dr. Sunday, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I agree with what everyone said. I think it's worth taking a look at it. Sounds like we need to anyway. I would like to hear from Tina and get her perspective about what's been working with the current contract and what hasn't. But I think too, the big thing that I've been hearing from people is just, like Jessica said, just a lack of understanding of how this all works. And I can see why people can't understand it because I don't understand it. When I first got on council, I remember asking, so how often do we meet and discuss what's going on for Halloween Town this year? And well, we don't do that. They just do their thing. And that just seems strange to me that we have these massive city events that we have no input over. Another thing that's been brought up to me is just the lack of oversight. So just agreeing with everything that's been said, I think it's a good time to take a look at it and see what's working and what's not, and see if we can make it better.
Sounds good. Any other questions for John or for Gloria? No, okay. So we're gonna have to take a break and we have an executive session that gonna be coming up, so.
I'm not feeling any direction with
I was
that.
gonna say, John's direction, I can tell. I mean, how do you guys feel about, John taking a few more months to sort out the revenue sharing part of the contract? And some other details that he brought up?
Oh, yeah, at a minimum, just. It's minimum extension of the. Correct, we can do that.
While you're figuring this out.
I don't think it'll take that long.
I'm fine with that. I feel like Tina's in the background and just.
Well, no, I think we should all sit down with maybe a special meeting, or not even a meeting, just a work session for us with the attorney. Or
I agree.
in here, just work it out, figure it out. And sooner than later.
Brought up that paper about the 2001 tourism, and there's some very good information in there. And you all just go nuts.
No, I apologize if you thought I wasn't.
Well, that's the way I felt about it.
Yeah, well,
I got nothing against Tina Curry. This is good, big stuff she puts on. But I'm just trying to get to the point of this town saying one or the other, and everybody's angry, and it's all her money. And well, no, it's the city's money. I'm sorry.
yeah,
We pay her,
that's
buy
right.
stuff, it's ours.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to reduce it down to a new contract. If you want to rework that one, go ahead, but not just the commission part. There's other items too. I'm done.
No,
It's just been the tourism's been a touchy subject for probably since I've got on council the last
That's
3
what I'm
years.
suggesting, just start over basically. And if you allow someone else to bid on it, if anybody would do it, then nobody can complain.
and I apologize when you brought up the old financial director, it struck a chord, and that's why he's no longer here.
Can't blame everything on him.
Well,
If he did such a bad job, why is he not in jail?
We're not even allowed to talk about it.
yeah, well, and again.
Shouldn't be talking about it.
Again, so. I mean, it's okay for you to put your digs in, but when I just look at you, I'm angry. Thanks, Russ. Mhm. All right, so now we're gonna take a break. We have to go into an executive session under ORS 192. Let me get it here.
Wait, what?
19.
We still have 2 other
Hi,
agendas.
Jessica, we have, well, because
That time certain.
yeah.
So you didn't say that.
Yes, well, I was gonna announce this first and then go into, we're gonna take a break because we're gonna go into executive session under ORS 192-660-2H, consulting with council potential litigation. So I'll ask that visitors exit the room and
Made it time.
yeah, 15 minutes, we'll resume.
That very.
Nope.
start with it.
Your wife.
I'm glad I said that before.
Yeah. she is.
All out there. Yes, wow.
I noticed the pictures in the background.
Are we ready? Okay, we're welcome back from our break. We went into executive session and we're at 19660 28. Yes, 8. And then so we're back, but we're gonna go into our next item on the agenda, which is discussion regarding the police station staff. So, again, this has been a topic that's been going on for quite some time. You know, we have some retirees coming up, guys are on burnout. We've heard them loud and clear. And this is Councilor Sunday, myself have met with Lieutenant Hogue and the union and folks and looking at staffing and hours, and this is something that we are continuing to work through and try to address the burnout that's going on. I think there's probably been some discussion on your end, a little bit more, so if you'd like to.
For sure, we hear you, we feel like it's a council priority, we kind of agree with that to that extent. And you know, when you're facing this budget challenge this year, and we're trying to build in that continuity of operations and police, where we see that forecast these retirements, trying to get them the resources they need to be successful. Both in, you know, in staffing and scheduling and, you know, all the tools they need to do the job. So to that end, the alignment between resources and expenses, we're looking at a model that provides that. And we get to the budget process where every time we do the budget, we'd like to align, give the council, the budget committee, the proposed budget that's pretty close, or at least it's close enough that you have a menu of options as far as, you know, pluses and minuses. I think that's not very detailed because I don't want to be too detailed at this point, but we are looking at, you know, some service alignment reductions and then other resources bringing into the budget to kind of make that all happen. We'll save it for the budget committee.
Well, and I get that. So, but I mean, bottom line is, you know, well, we appreciate our police department and all they do, chief. And that the guys are just on burnout, you know, meeting with the union guys, and they want to know that there's at least, you know, hope of getting this relieved, this burnout relieved with the retirees, especially. That's their bottom line is it's about the 3 or 4 people that are leaving. That how do we replace those people? That's the big elephant in the middle of the room that needs to be talked about. And Councilor Sundin and I, in that discussion, heard that that the police department build right now is not the most important, that staffing is, and that $10 fee would relieve, would allow 3 new hires to anticipate those retirees. And then down the road, if we chose to, we know that there's some challenges with the police department. That down the road, if we decided to build, we could, move forward at that point in time.
Well, I have concerns about that because, we've spent a lot of money on building this police station. So that's just wasted money. And I have a problem with that. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it makes us look good. I think it makes us look really bad. And I think that, I'm not confident that we have, truly looked under every rock to find money to get more police officers. I don't think taking away from money we've already prioritized for another project is smart. That's just my opinion.
So some of the big decisions that council is going to be faced with in this budget process is to consciously reduce our reserve balance from 20% down to 15%. And we know that 15% right now is about a $1.6 million deficit. And the getting back to 20 is about a $2.1 million deficit. And the questions you're gonna have to decide is it okay, we get back to your goal, your policy of 20% in 1 year, or we can hold the line, kind of work back that over several years here as we grow out of this. And that'll be something
That'll be something that we need to talk about budget meeting. Right. Yeah, so I mean, we're trying to get to the bottom of this, but and I know that we talked about also working and looking at the budget and looking at staffing and hours there too, and looking at some of those. So I mean, that's still something that we can do, which is in our control between now and then. That I do believe there's a little bit of flexibility there. I mean, there's gotta be, and the union seemed open and receptive to whatever that may look like. Of course, that'd be a council and union approval type situation and moving forward.
Well, I think there's things that we can look at saving money on or putting pauses on, like the Riverwalk project. Because if we build the infrastructure and we build our city bigger, but we don't have the policing to support it, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. So if there's any projects that we're gonna stop, I think it should be the Riverwalk project for now. It doesn't make sense to me to keep it going.
So part of the budget process though, is that we have a loan that was already taken out and that we could roll into the urban renewal to push those projects forward too. And I think that's a huge part of a project that we already have ready to roll, that's not gonna get challenged in LUBA and maybe held up and maybe a court of appeals for 2 years.
Yeah.
Are you speaking about?
So you think Riverwalk's gonna be approved?
I'm just saying that
by LUBA
it
too?
could be very easily
You know something I don't,
dug into if somebody wanted to cause trouble.
you're talking about Riverwalk for LUBA?
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
So we've already reduced the scope, and actually in your package tonight, there's a scope from Mayor Reed that reduces the scope of their services significantly. Removing all of the elements that aren't grant funded, grant supported. It is an urban renewal project too, so that doesn't really connect with the general fund too closely. It's grant funds, it's dedicated parks SDCs, which are restricted funds, and a huge scope revision to get rid of the expensive pieces because it came back so high, 5 million, we only had 3 million, and we're hoping that we rebid this, that it comes out and aligns with that and doesn't really impact some connectivity pieces between like the bottom of the stairs and the Riverwalk that we're looking at doing. You'll see that in a presentation coming up early in January.
So you're talking about getting the bones.
I'm with
Do the minimum.
I'm with you 100%.
We're not losing the grant.
I'm with you 100% that the police station is old, 2,200 square feet, it's a brick building, it's a flat roof. How do you even remodel that? People say add to it, remodel it. I'm thinking, how do you do that there? We do have a plan that could be plopped anywhere, worst case scenario, that would fit in a lot of different areas. That plan is still always gonna be good, that's been drawn up. It has the panic room, it has the offices, it has the bathroom. I'm all with you for building. If we are held up 2 years from now, still paying on that same chunk of money, waiting for a new decision, that's not being fiscally responsible. We spent money on a plan, that's correct. It's not wasted money because we do have a plan that can be plopped other places too. But, I think we need to, through the budget process, work this out and, figure where we're going through a committee of 10. You know, that's just my opinion on it. I think it's, a smart option. And moving forward.
Are you suggesting that?
100% though, I'd love to be putting shovels in the ground tomorrow.
Well,
As soon
and
as it dried out.
I think that if we're gonna look at, cutting things out, I think it should be prioritizing by safety and infrastructure needs for the city. And I don't think that the Riverwalk is in that category right now. I think it's like they're building a carousel in a mall. It's not a priority. I think we need to have our bathrooms first in our parking lot. And that's what I consider the police station is a necessity for the city.
What bathrooms and parking lot are you referring to?
No, I'm saying that having a new police station is like having that in a mall.
So
You
we
can't
have- we
build-
have-
you don't build a carousel if you don't have
So we
bathrooms
bought a bond
for the police station.
that has to be utilized.
Yeah,
We're paying interest on. But we can roll it into a different project, which I tend to disagree with you a little bit. I think all is equally important. That we deserve to have a nice waterfront as citizens. And our urban renewal will pay for it and will actually soak that up, correct? I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, just a little bit.
Renewal funds can't pay for operations.
I know, but we can use it for different things and be creative with those funds to pay other things. So that's very easily done. We've seen it done many times.
That's
So-
why we're proposing to use to match that to the grant funds that would potentially not take advantage of $1.5 million grant.
For the
For the
Riverwalk, yeah.
just that first phase.
Yeah.
If we just got 100,000, we have 200.
You're saying that whole project's grant funded?
No.
You said matching.
I'm saying 1.6 million of it's grant funded.
I know, but we still have to match it, which means we still have to dig into our pockets. Right?
Urban Renewal Agency is paying for it. Which.
And where does the money from the Urban Renewal Agency come from?
Those funds.
We're gonna have-
Agencies cannot pay. for
So time out,
Yeah.
time out. Because Kathy on you as administrator and me as a mayor, that we haven't had our urban renewal meeting and educated people on urban renewal completely 100% on how the funding mechanism works. And if we do not have that before our budget committee meeting, we are gonna be SOL.
So that's on, I believe on the agenda for the 7th, is that right?
Okay,
From
thank you.
it. No, we do need to have an urban renewal.
Yes. Yes, and it needs to, we also need to get the chair off, Councilor President Morton, former President Morton was the chair, so he needs to come in and relieve. Start it and relieve it to that, who we choose to be the president. Out of that, the chairman. So I think that really needs to happen, and that requires Lorelei, I do believe. Who can explain a lot better than any one of us. Gloria has been through it because she comes from, actually, Gloria probably understands it better than any staff member here. Being from Independence and the financial director from Independence and how the mechanism works. And that's how they facilitated their whole waterfront. And it comes from a frozen tax base that nobody gets to tax those districts from. So it's not coming out of our general budget. That's how it pays for itself. But we need to explain that, I think, to the whole budget committee as well. In moving forward. Invite them to that meeting.
To have our plan is to have a meeting of the urban renewal agency and do like a training kind of session, introduction to, we've got several new members on the council, which are the agency board. So we'll do, Jenny's plan is to do an educational type thing and also kind of give you a little overview of what our thoughts are. And then also we need to start a budget calendar as well for the urban renewal, because last time it was biennial. And that budget expires also at the end of June. So yes, so
2 years.
so we'll have that calendar as well. Yes. So our intention is to have a budget committee meeting for the urban renewal on that third calendared meeting that we have for the city.
Okay.
Working on presentations, and there's a bunch of materials that have already been drafted for that.
I think it's important that we have an understanding of what we can spend that money on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Comment, I think, our priority should be live fire safety when we do any development. City's been pretty bad at developing, so. A couple of things we could do, not big dollars, put in the police account. Would be call frequency. We've got the new apartments that are assuming their officers way more than normal. And if that's accounted for and they are billed at the end of the month for.
Other cities do.
We have a code that beats that.
Put it in place, get some money. They're not paying taxes. Come on, it's a drain already.
Yeah.
And we have to have security at the Cascade sites coming next month. And they've been paying $500,000 a year for their security.
Right.
We're not gonna do that.
No.
Let's put some funds towards the police to extra patrols out there. And that will give them some more funds to deal with too. Those are just two things right now that I can see that could be done without
I agree with that.
big motions.
So there's lots of options, but we have to get together. We also have to, again, do our due diligence and look at, the staffing and, we're looking at all our finances and we need to look at that. Just because, again, I'll come back to the numbers and I think we need to look at it. And if we don't, it's not very fiscally responsible just to not look at it. We had a budget of 2.4 million when in 2016, we have a budget of 5.6 million. That's taken away the one officer because it's actually 5.8 million in 2023. So at 7 years, we've increased $3.4 million. And I just think it's an increase of 140%, and we need to look at it.
Putting in the retirement then.
That's not putting probably in the retirement.
But it's total budget, so it would include.
Is it?
Well, and again, just to be frank, again, like, I'm not saying that this doesn't need to happen right now, but this is a Band-Aid problem that the police have been telling us about for years. And we need to have a system in place for retirements because of how long it takes to get police officers on the road. So even if we do this right now, we still have to solve the problem with police in St. Helens. I'm just putting that out there again, because again, it's a Band-Aid for a temporary solution that will happen again if we don't plan for it.
And we are planning for it. So,
By a hiring process in place.
well, we're budgetary ways. We're anticipating that you're gonna support that in the budget process.
Any other discussion, Counselor Sunday?
I don't think anything that hasn't been mentioned already.
Okay. All right, so let's go on to our next item, which is a report from our city administrator. John Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. Usually this last meeting of the year is kind of a wind down and recap of pleasant things, but it's just been so busy that it's so many business items I still want to go through here. But tonight we're going to adopt a budget officer. Lori's going to take over that position. The grant agreement to the DLCD for the economic opportunity analysis is something I mentioned last week that's on your agenda for approval tonight. The amendment to the Mayor Reed Riverwalk project that is on for tonight is actually a scope reduction. We initially allocated 500,000 for that. There's 450,000 remaining. We can kind of push them really tight to get to clean that up as much as possible. We reduced that by about $176,000. And how we've done that is things like inspection services. We're calling Portland to do our road girls, paying an hour out, hour back, hour while they're here.
And we can do that in-house.
You can do that either in-house or contract with a local engineer firm that can do that and save about $76,000 just in that issue alone. So, and you know, I think that if we don't move forward with the Riverwalk project, we're putting these grant funds that have already been spent a few times into jeopardy. Dollars. The 100,000 we just got from Travel Oregon. And again, so when we go through the education on the urban renewal agency, what it can pay for and it can't pay for, I hope we come to the conclusion that it's a good investment to move forward. So I keep a list as calling it the top 10 list. It's only 4 pages long, but it's a joke to myself. But the Project Sprint, we're still very hopeful that they're going to move forward. There's no indication that they won't. We should have some kind of indication of that fairly soon. You know, the working with PGE, the PUD, get that new substation, get the power needs met out here seems like a real possibility. And kudos to everybody working on that. They really come together, and we're just working really hard to try to get this big project that should be very transformational to our budget and our community and jobs. It's fantastic. The Cascades tissue closure, we have this lease termination agreement that we're coming to terms on. We have a draft intended approval from the legal attorneys. It's important to Cascades that we're wrapped up by the end of the year. And I think we're really close to that. So it's a little bit too early for this meeting, so we're hoping that we can do a special session next week. Talk about the terms of that agreement. Talk about as close as we're going to be. So the Mill redevelopment plan, Cascades is leaving. There's some big issues. Councilor Hubbard mentioned one of them. And I wanted to talk about security services real quickly. I have two proposals I wanted your input on. Pass these out. One of them would be working with our apologies, Councilor Sundin. We have two proposals for security services out at the mill site. And on July or January 1, this is going to be the city's responsibility. So the first proposal is from our existing Cascades service provider, and the other one is an extension of our agreement with Moore Site Services. And the difference between the two, I would say, is that the security focuses just on security, and they have a route they go and they patrol. They'll do it whatever hours that we want to. We look at two scenarios: one just a night shift, and then having another day shift potentially done locally. And the other one was more services that is proposed to do this coverage, but at the same time they'd be out on site working. They're still working at the mill. They're doing maintenance, or getting ready to break down some machinery and equipment. So they're gonna have people out there for the next several months. And anyway, they've offered to beat out those eyes on the ground up there.
What's the breakdown between security and maintenance?
That's a good question.
Good question.
We'll arrest somebody.
And it is think we have a conversation to be had around, you know, as they move forward with the auction or, you know, however this demolition plan unfolds over the next few weeks here. We have those conversations, but
Demolition. Demolition plan?
not, we'll have just what we're gonna do with the mill, conversation about the repurposing of the mill.
Taking apart the machines.
The machines, is, you know, is it gonna get scrapped, is it gonna get auctioned, is it, I also have a proposal from an auctioneer that Cascades has used on the last 16 mills they shut down, that this, well, I didn't put it in the packet here. That's part of the conversation, there's a lot of this Cascade closure that's line, but
I really see that as two different discussions, one with the departure of Cascade and the other, you know,
Right.
totally different.
this is thinking with a lens of we're gonna need security on January 1st. How are we gonna continue with paying the existing company to do that? Are we gonna do it ourselves? There's you know, quite a bit of inventory in the building that has value that make sure that doesn't walk away.
Yeah, I just think Russ is right. I mean, the helper versus pipe fitter versus the millwright, the supervisor to electrician to helpers. A lot of different things there.
And he offered and just said, we'll be here anyway, we'll be productive.
Yeah.
Be there anyway, yeah. We need to pay them a separate bill, they're already
I
gonna.
think that would be the helper would probably be at night or something. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
there'll be some nighttime.
Yeah.
I mean, I like what Russ said, which is that we try to kick this money to the police and have them do extra rounds instead of bringing in all of this extra stuff.
I like that idea, but I'm also,
$50,000 for the police department, everybody happier in the plan. Oh God,
You can't do that on the urban renewal.
more money going out to someone else, why don't we keep it in the community?
Again, it's just, it's a couple of options that we haven't. You know, I don't know if the police have the capacity to do this level of service.
would that be trained to turn on the fire suppression system the way it's left?
Yeah, it's not too hard.
You're still gonna hire more for specifics and things, so that's up above, I mean, that's just, he's got your hourly rate. Gonna be whatever it is.
Yeah, that's certainly an option to have them out there doing what they're doing and then.
So this other one, is this a monthly, I've seen a monthly rate before, but that's kind of general.
Hourly.
No,
Yeah, you know,
it's just a monthly total.
They told
Yeah, this one only has an hourly, if you do the math.
No, it's there in the,
Oh, 730, well, it says 730 hours per month.
412.
yeah, which I agree, it's a lot of money. I'm not,
Yeah.
not dismissing any of that. I was just like, wow, but,
So if we go with, more services. Is he proposing, since he's on site anyway, to be doing the security as well, with this number?
Mhm.
It's cheaper than,
it is, yes.
so it makes the most sense. I know, I'm just saying, like, if we would go that way, this makes the most sense to me.
It does to me as well.
Well, he can't do anything yet, though. He can't do any of the services he's provided yet until we figure out how we're.
Well, you could, because we signed up with him, if we chose to go that route.
We haven't made a decision yet about how everything's gonna happen with an auctioneer and stuff, so he can't do anything yet, right?
We actually signed an agreement when you were gone.
Hey, what the heck?
You were here. You missed a meeting.
Okay, just wait until I get to be mayor. You're out.
More services is to do kind of on-call consulting and whatever we maintenance, you know, things that pipe breaks, you can respond to it if pump needs fixing, they'll fix it.
I think, a phone call to the police chief to talk about their capacity to do drivers, since there's already gonna be somebody there that you guys already made a decision on is gonna be there.
No,
I think just having a
no,
drive-through
it
makes way
was-
more sense.
we would have the agreement, which would work for that. But that's not what our agreement is. What John just said. We have an agreement with more construction to to, if anything happens down there, he has the best understanding of the mill of anybody, any contractor in our area. So that's what he's contracted to do.
Right, so I'm
Which
saying
could
if he's
fold into
already
this.
doing that, then I think we don't.
It could fold into this, but yeah.
Keep them separate. He's not gonna be 24-hour security, he's 412, so he's only gonna be there 4 days. a week. Separate the security end of it versus what to go to run the mill. I mean, is that his monthly, that's what he won't work for any less than that? No, that's his, what, 4 people?
Yeah, it's 4 people.
4 people. Well, I don't see how you're gonna need 4 people down there all the time. I had to try the on-call.
It's something we could talk to him about though. I mean,
Yeah, it's not really good.
if nothing's done, it's just a bid.
I think I literally get this. Yes. I'm saying, there is quite a bit of equipment and machinery that has value that is
Need some security.
needs security. Yes, needs
Okay, we
security,
get
yeah.
that, you know.
So
So you're gonna go down there and you're gonna be working here during the day. Down there at night. You're behind the ball.
To make you earn that
Being city
paycheck.
administrator fun.
It's like you work anywhere. Oh, Mark.
I think they have internet down there. I think they have internet right now.
Yeah,
I think I can shut off soon though.
that Greenway left, but we could ask him a proposal from him to come to us and say, how are you gonna keep the site secure? How are you gonna patrol? And we got some money to give him, we're gonna give someone else, and then use the guy that doesn't do security, use him for the maintenance and repairs and stuff.
Perhaps code enforcement can go down there.
Yeah.
We have a code
Yeah.
enforcement
He
officer.
can, he can put up for enforcement. Is he under the police chief?
I just don't wanna strap these guys any more than they are. They're already on burnout. So I mean, I understand the funding, but the funding actually gets somebody in the academy or maybe it allows us to get a lateral. And they're already in burnout. So
Patrols, you just need a cadet. Okay.
we don't have, yeah, I mean. And I don't know, I mean, that's something,
Security guard is no more than somebody who carries a radio.
that's true, yeah.
What about asking the sheriff?
Sure.
No, the sheriff,
Oh,
Columbia County Sheriff's Office.
We could reach out to
Maybe have
security firms. too.
someone from Public Works stopping by there a couple of times.
well,
a
they
week or
definitely would
something.
be there throughout the week.
So I think we could cover it.
You know, needs to be circling there and. You know what's up.
It's doable.
I think to some extent Rory would be the best, I mean, in my opinion, if we needed any extra help, the cheapest and localist person would be Rory Moore. Site services.
Yeah, and to the extent he's there and has people there, that's just so commitment for him to be there.
Yeah.
And you matter.
If there was any gaps that need to be filled, I would highly recommend that he be that person over the other company.
Gonna be there anyway, right?
Yeah.
We got 2 days, not there. No, 3 days. So you can 412s. In 3 days, it's bare. The site. He's securing the site basically the way you're thinking. He secures
It shifts around the clock.
4 days. Here's his narrative. Labor.
Shifts around the clock. Staggered.
So,
Like 2 and 2.
Isn't very clear.
I could get some clarity on that too.
You're gonna be maintaining one of our biggest pieces of real estate.
Hey, what else you got?
That's it.
I know it's not it, you got 4 pages.
Well, there's a lot of things, but just to highlight, right? There,
Yeah.
just a lot.
Kathy?
I mean, up in January is when we would normally advertise for the community grant program that we do. Is that something you want to do? In light of this?
With the financial situations, I don't think we should this year.
About 18,000.
So. Much as I'd like to.
And then
I think if that's the case, we need to make a public announcement about it, because there are people that we filtered to that program to apply for those grants. So.
yeah, coming out of the recession in 2008. Stopped doing that for quite a few years. The city needed the resources to take care of its own first.
If it's some type of a public announcement is appropriate about that program, and, you know, maybe when our plans are to reopen it.
Yeah.
We can do a press release. I'll work with Crystal on that. But we don't really have a time frame because we don't know what the budget's gonna
Well,
be.
maybe it can be like after, you know, next year's budget committee, it will be talked about again, something
We'll
like that, you know.
reassess
like,
it
Yeah,
each
we'll
year.
reassess next year to determine if we can open it back up. So it's not like it's just gone completely, you know, that we do still think it's important, just can't afford it right now.
So. It's harder to bring them back.
So,
True.
and then, anything else? Anything else? Okay, we got 6:30 tonight, public hearing. And then regular session at 7. With that, we are adjourned.